General Peg Lautenschlager, thanks very much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Now first, I guess I wanted to get your response to the fact that Stephen Avery was, in fact, found innocent and released from prison after the Attorney General's office represented the prosecutors in the appeal of his case.
Well, that's a standard practice for us. It's one, the issues on appeal had nothing to do with the conviction. You know, you have to remember that the conviction was done at a time when things like photo lineups and the like were available, but where DNA evidence testing really was not. It was also the AG's office and our crime lab which indeed tested the evidence which was available for testing and something we could test when we did in order to exonerate him.
But now, after all of this, does your office intend to review exactly what did happen in this case?
We are going to do a review. Yesterday, the Manitowoc County District Attorney gave us a formal request asking us to look into the procedures and techniques that were used during the investigation and during the prosecution of the case. We have assigned 3 attorneys, 2 from our public integrity unit, the 2 attorneys there, and 1 from our criminal litigation division, a sex crimes expert, to help with that investigation. As well, we have investigators from our public integrity unit of our division of criminal investigation who will be going through, not to second guess, not to Monday night quarterback, but instead just to review the process and the procedure that was in place at the time and ensure that if there were irregularities, they be made public, and if there were not irregularities, that indeed the public know that.
So would there be something in the future perhaps where the Attorney General's office got involved in checking police practices in prosecutions?
What really happens is we try to get in on the front end through our Division of Law Enforcement Services, which includes our state crime labs, our Crime Information Bureau, and our law enforcement trainings and standards. What we try to do is ensure that our Training and Standards Board sets appropriate standards for police officers throughout the state, law enforcement officials throughout the state, and those standards are implemented by the board. They include required training, they include protocol that is suggested for various investigations and the like, and we are clearly in the forefront in that. And we do not have a state Civil Rights Act, which would be an act which would afford us the opportunity to investigate police abuses or mispractice. However, we do have the authority when requested by a district attorney to come in and investigate, and accordingly we're doing so in the Avery matter.
Well, do you suppose then that there were some problems there? I mean, given what I know about the case now, it was based on an eyewitness account, you know, the victim, and it sounded as though the investigatory work, you know, didn't go far enough. Obviously, it didn't.
Well, you have to remember, though, this was 1985, and indeed, an eyewitness account was all they had. Many times, cases, particularly involving sexual assault at the time, were a victim's word versus a defendant's word, somebody identifying someone. I'm not going to make any predispositions, I don't have any predispositions in terms of the correctness or incorrectness of the law enforcement work at the time, but to pretend that indeed mere eyewitness identification and a victim's word versus a defendant's word isn't sufficient for a conviction, I think would be a sad road to take, because if we were to do that, we would essentially eliminate many people. We would eliminate many people from the mix in terms of people who might with certainty see someone and know them to be their victimizer. So to draw a clear line in the sand, I think, would be inappropriate. One of the things I think we do need to discuss in a public forum, and I think attorneys on both sides of the criminal justice advocacy equation will get involved, is the issue of whether or not in Wisconsin expert witness testimony regarding the reliability of eyewitness testimony should be allowed in court. And that's one of the things that, frankly, in this case, it was allowed in, even though that's not the practice in the state.
Let's move along to the state crime labs.
Yes.
These days, eyewitness testimony is perhaps even not as important as physical evidence,
Absolutely.
and DNA is a big part of that, obviously.
We have two areas that are growing incredibly. Actually, our state crime lab's work is increasing significantly in all sorts of areas, but the two areas involving identification of possible defendants is in fingerprint technology, which is advancing like crazy as well, and as well DNA technology and what we're able to do there.
You need more money.
We need more money. We need more help. We fought like crazy during this last budget cycle to maintain the resources we have, and we were fortunate to be able to keep those. But we hope that in the future, given the backlogs we have, given cases like this, that those involved in the state budget process will recognize the need to have sufficient staffing at what are very good state crime labs.
Very briefly, what do the backlogs mean to justice in Wisconsin?
Well, what they mean is we have, for example, 340 DNA cases in our Madison office waited to be tested. It means 196 in our Milwaukee office. We tend to prioritize the cases based on what needs to go to court immediately, the severity of the incidents, that kind of thing. Two of our biggest contributors to our backlog right now when it comes to DNA testing are what are called cold crime cases, where old evidence that has never been tested for DNA crimes may be tested now. Most of those crimes do not have a defendant, but they are crimes where we think that with DNA testing, a defendant might be located. The other area, of course, is one like Mr. Avery's, and that's indeed where we have defendants who would like to have the evidence tested.
Right. Like very much. All right,
Yep.
Peg Lautenschlager, thanks very much.
Pleasure to be here.